again? I don't want it. You want me to hit you again? I don't want it. You want me to hit you again? My God.
A North Carolina educator is allegedly slapped not once, but twice across the face by a high school student. We're analyzing this shocking video with trial attorney David Ring. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey, everybody, this is a Law&Crime legal alert. Google Incognito tracked users' browsing data without their knowledge, and Mass Tort Alliance, one of our legal sponsors, is helping users file for compensation due to Google misleading the privacy of their incognito browser. So if you've used Google Incognito anytime since 2016, you can start your claim in less than 10 questions at incognitoclaims.com/sidebar. It is a moment so shocking that you might not believe it if it weren't on video. A student at a Winston-Salem, North Carolina high school allegedly physically assaulted a teacher.
I don't want it. You want me to hit you again? I don't want it. You want me to hit you again? My God. Stop playing with me. I told your dumb not those dumb ass off your face. And do I look like I care? What's wrong with you? What you gonna do? Still sit in that chair and you use some my brain. Stop playing with me. Ain't nobody even come and you just got slapped. Go back to teaching.
It's horrific. I don't have another word. It's horrific. The student, identified only as a minor, approaches the teacher and appears to hit her twice, hard, knocking her head back and sending her glasses flying off her face. It's unclear what exactly provoked this attack, but no one jumps in to help, and you can even hear other students laughing. It happened last week at Parkland High School in Forsyth County. The district attorney, Jim O'Neill, reviewed the video with the sheriff within an hour of it going viral.
Both Sheriff Kimbrough and myself spent the morning over at Parkland High School speaking with the teacher because we want one message to be delivered today, and that's this. This isn't about the color of your skin. This isn't about your political affiliation. Today is about one thing: sending a message to the teachers out there that law enforcement and the district attorney's office support you. We care about the job you do. Nobody goes to work and expects to get assaulted. We take allegations of this kind very seriously. We expect that the message that's delivered is that if you put your hand on law enforcement, or if you put your hand on a teacher, justice will be swift and mighty.
Well, Sheriff Bobby Kimbrough called for accountability.
My question is this, is that the community should be horrified. The community should be outraged. I know there are a lot of things in our society that used to be sacred, but something must remain sacred. Those that educate our children, those that give our children hope, must not go to work in fear of being assaulted, by no means. And when I sat with the teacher today, I'm amazed that she even showed up for work today.
Wow. Yeah, one day after the assault, Juvenile Justice issued a secure custody order for one count of communicating threats and 2 counts of misdemeanor assault against this student. Student information and disciplinary information is federally protected. It can't be released by school officials, so it'll be a question of how much details we actually get about this. District Attorney O'Neill and Sheriff Kimbrough say that videos like these reinforce the push for more SROs or school resource officers in local schools, but it is always a question of resources. Now, on the other hand, Winston-Salem Police Chief William Penn said that there needs to be accountability at home and in the community as well, that we can't just expect law enforcement to handle everything. In a statement, Superintendent Tricia McManus said, quote, "This behavior will not be tolerated. At no time is it acceptable for students to put their hands on a teacher in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County schools. My focus now is on making sure that our teacher is taken care of and has the support needed to navigate through the lasting effects of this incident." McManus said that there will be a hearing to determine the student's consequences separate from the legal consequences. She's going to recommend expulsion at a hearing. But it seems that this is not the first time something like this has happened. No, at the same school, by the same student, there apparently was another incident. Brings me to Larry Edwards. He was a teacher for decades before retiring and becoming a substitute teacher for Parkland High School. And he claims that he was pushed in the head by this very same student in May of 2023. Fox 8 spoke with Edwards this week. He told them that the teen gave him a fake name and wasn't even supposed to be in the biology class that Edwards was subbing for. And Edwards says that the student was being very disruptive.
I walked up to the desk to get my phone to call the office, and he mockingly walked behind me, and I happened to turn around and see him, and the student started laughing, and next thing I know, he had taken his hand and smushed my head.
Yeah. Edwards says he tried to report what happened, even wrote up an affidavit, provided it to school administrators. But Edwards says about a month later, though, he got a letter from the Juvenile Justice Office, but never heard about a court date. He was then told that officials took another course of action. The DA was asked during the news conference whether the student had assaulted any of the teachers before, but said he couldn't comment on that. Let's break it down. Let's talk about it. Let me bring in David Ring, trial attorney, friend of the show. David, good to have you on here. Overall thoughts on this case and seeing this, because I was shocked and appalled to see it myself.
Well, I had the exact same reaction, Jesse. I mean, I think anyone who sees that video has the same reaction. It's disgusting, repulsive, outrageous. It's scary that some student could violently assault a teacher like that. And boy, you sit there and you watch this video, and the teacher, knows it's coming, and she sits there and takes, and this isn't just a slap. I mean, this is he violently strikes her, not once, but twice. And it's just outrageous. Something's got to be done.
She gets slapped twice, doesn't move, doesn't fight back. By the way, just before we even get into more details, if she would have defended herself physically, would she have gotten in trouble, you think?
No, they're clearly self-defense. But here's the problem is you're in that situation, it's a female teacher and a male student. Is she going to be able to defend herself? Is it going to escalate? Is her injuries going to be worse? Is the student going to start punching her? I mean, boy, for her to sit there and control herself like that, wow. I mean, good for her, but what a horrible situation.
I was also surprised by the students' reactions. Look, you could say they might have been in shock. They didn't know what to do, but you heard this giggling. You see one person videotaping. It was kind of disturbing to see nonetheless. All right, but I do want to start with this first alleged incident from May 2023 with the substitute teacher, and then we'll work our way to the current incident. What I'm not clear about is if this student did this, how was he even allowed to remain in school?
Right? Impossible. I mean, let's say if a teacher had put their hands on a student and physically assaulted a student, that teacher is going to be disciplined, probably suspended, and if it happens again, they're going to be fired. But for the student to do it to the teacher and apparently nothing happened, maybe he got a warning.
Yeah, they said another course of action was taken, according to the substitute teacher. I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
To me, having dealt with school districts for my entire career, that means, he got a slap on the wrist. Hey, don't do that again or you're going to be in trouble. So really nothing was done. And it certainly did not deter him. Look what he did a year later.
The fact that the DA chose not to comment on whether this student attacked other teachers, does that tell you something?
Here's the problem. When you're dealing with minors, and minors have this right to privacy, and you can get in trouble for revealing things about minors. And that's the problem sometimes, is that the prosecutors can't divulge all the information they have about a minor. Juvenile court is highly confidential. Things that happen there, sentences in juvenile court, we may never hear about it because it's so confidential.
Well, that's what I wanted to go to. Now, what are the legal consequences for this student for allegedly hitting this teacher that we saw in the video? As I mentioned, the Juvenile Justice issued a secure custody order for one count of communicating threats, 2 counts of assault. My understanding, these are all misdemeanors. And according to the DA, because these are misdemeanors, they can't try this student as an adult. So it appears this will remain in the juvenile court system. What could this student be looking at? If the student, I don't know, is there a plea? Does it go to trial? Would he be convicted? I mean, what are we looking at as potential consequences here?
It's very similar to a normal court, but it's confidential and it's a bit more informal. And so this student could ultimately enter a plea of guilty to the misdemeanors and go to juvenile hall for maybe some months or maybe a year. Um, he could get off. He could enter a plea and they could put him on a work program or home detention, something like that. They have all sorts of solutions that it can do for this student. But look, I think they look at this and they know they've got to take a hard line with him. I think he's got to serve some time in juvie hall.
Well, I looked at some of the potential options in North Carolina, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they could put him on probation, which is an option for delinquent juveniles. It would require him to be supervised by a juvenile court counselor, follow specific terms and conditions. There could be protective supervision. These are for undisciplined juveniles. Again, there has to be some sort of supervision. There could be secure custody. They place him in a locked facility, a detention center. There's a youth development center. It's a secure residential facility. It provides treatment, education, rehab services. Do any of those options sound like something that should come out here?
Look, all of those options are on the table, and the juvenile courts can have this broad discretion to decide which one is appropriate for this student. You and I and everyone else watching the video, not knowing anything else about the circumstances of this student or what else happened behind the scenes, you should go to a juvenile detention center for a while and serve time.
Yeah. Let me ask you about these other consequences. As I mentioned, the superintendent mentioned considering something other than the legal consequences, potentially expulsion. Is that something that would be warranted here? How does that work in terms of a student being expelled? Do they go to another school? Can they get into another school? How does it work in terms of expelled students?
Well, I can't imagine this student not being expelled from this school. And so what happens is the student is entitled to have a hearing, an expulsion hearing, and he and his parents or guardians can present evidence as to why he should not be expelled from the school. And obviously the school puts on evidence why he should be expelled, and someone makes a decision on that. I think it's a no-brainer here that he gets expelled from this school. And where does he go from there? He can go to some alternative type of high school. He could be homeschooled. There's other options for him. He certainly has to finish school, but he's not going to return to this school.
Would he have difficulty getting into another school, you think?
Boy, I'll tell you what. Look, he's entitled to an education,
Right,
right? Every
right,
every
yeah.
student's entitled to an education. The problem is when they've committed a violent act like this, you're putting other teachers and staff and students at risk. So wherever he is placed, it has got to be a place where they know what they're dealing with and what his past actions are, and it's got to be some sort of institution that's keeping a very, very close eye on him.
Do you think more school resource officers, as was we were talking about before, that's the answer? Could that help the situation? But of course, there's an issue of funding and resources in order to make that happen. But do you think more school resource officers are the answer?
I think schools would always welcome the opportunity to have more school resource officers there or security people there. The problem is one, the cost, and two, are you going to put one in every single classroom? I mean, that's never going to happen because of the cost. And so, these schools, they can have obviously hundreds up to thousands of students, many, many classrooms. And so how do you monitor that at all times? It's very difficult. I think going back to what you and I were talking about earlier, the solution is, hey, when there's an incident, like this first incident we talked about with this student, they've got to take really hard, decisive action. They can't just say, hey, it's a
Mm,
slap on the wrist, and then it leads to another issue like this. And so schools are always in need of resources and funding, and anything they can do to protect staff, teachers, students, everyone's all for it.
Which brings me to my final question. Does the school face any liability from this teacher to sue the school for what happened to her? I mean, you talked about it. If there was this prior incident and it was just a slap on the wrist, he was in that he was in that classroom. He allegedly did this. Does the school face legal liability? Could she sue them?
Potentially she could. Absolutely. I mean, this school is, they were what we call on notice. They had knowledge that this student was physically assaultive to another teacher. We don't know what action they took, but assuming they did nothing or next to nothing and did not warn other teachers that this student had done this, sure, she could have a claim against the school for that violent assault and any, injuries or emotional distress she's experiencing from that. Hey, if it was, I could definitely see this teacher, kudos to her for coming back to school the next day, right? That's amazing.
Right? Amazing.
But I could see a lot of teachers who are like, okay, I'm done. I am not putting myself in this environment. And by doing that, she's losing her job, her benefits, and all sorts of financial benefits she's entitled to, and that can lead to a lawsuit.
Well, listen, I give her credit. First of all, I hope she's okay. Second of all, I give her credit for not escalating the situation further. I mean, we talked about whether she'd be in her rights to defend herself, but she just remained calm despite that happening to her. And coming back the next day, my gosh, sometimes we don't acknowledge our teachers as much as we really should, because it's sometimes a thankless job. It's a tough job. They don't get paid enough. They don't get enough recognition. But this is just an example of this is not something that they should be going into. This is not the environment that they should be expecting, that they could be attacked. Really sad situation. But David Ring, thanks for coming on, talking to us about it. Always appreciate it. Good seeing you.
All right. Thank you, Jesse.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you here on Sidebar. Thank you so much. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.